Yeah.
Do you find that a lot of people feel that way, or people are more
I
one-sided?
would say overwhelmingly, to my surprise, a lot of readers hate one woman or the other with vitriolic vigor.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm surprised.
me
I
too.
thought more people would feel a pull between wanting to get out of the rat race of social acceptance and trying to fit in.
Yeah, I don't, and you know what, the weirdest thing for me is I don't understand it. Like even with my friends come to me and I really, wow, that Lily, she's really a piece of work. And I'm like, really? Because I sort of like her. I mean, it's just been, it was a really eye-opening thing. I had to get used to having that conversation with people. I mean, I took all of my bad parts and or portioned them out between both of those characters. So like my need to people please, but also my need to be just like a curmudgeonly hermit. So it was a little bit tricky for me because I'm like, ow, oh, you know, either whoever they hate, I'm like, oh dear, ouch. But I can totally relate. I mean, I think there are two spectrums of me. I mean, I could never, ever in a million years be as nice as Nan, but,
I don't know about that.
yeah.
That's a really great question or a comment, Leslie. And it was interesting to hear, Cara, that you found that people really had a strong feeling either way. Because I was more like Leslie, like I could really appreciate Lily's drive to get a doctorate, and I could also appreciate Nan's soft, empathetic, and the the miscarriage and her pain and the realness. So it's interesting that that people found a dislike, because I like Leslie could kind of
Yeah.
like different parts of each of those.
I really liked the way you contrasted all the different personalities and sort of played off each other and how they balanced each other out, and they built this wonderful relationship between all of them.
Thank you. I worked really hard on making this an ensemble piece and making sure that each of them was really fully developed. Nan, at some point in the writing of it, Nan had really become a secondary character, and I had to go back and really spend a lot more time with her because I didn't want her. I felt like that was the kind of woman who even today would be considered could be considered a secondary character, and I didn't want that. So then I gave her that whole scene about knowing what to do, you know, with the church and sending and taking James away and making Lily go to church. I gave her that whole scene, and that was awesome. And I was like, when I finished writing that, I was like, oh man, I did something good for you. Like, yeah, we're seeing your strengths. Yeah. I mean, I don't make this up. I sit with the character, so I didn't have any of that. I just sat down with Nan and was like, okay, we're missing part of your story. And then, you know, then the story kind of comes to me.
That's really interesting, because I was wondering how she knew that would fix things.
She's a minister's daughter. Don't you think her mother has been telling her how to fix things forever? Like off screen, we don't really see it, but I'm pretty sure she got a lot of instruction from her mother.
Yeah, it just showed, to me, it looked like there's a lot more going on in her head than what you see. Like she really sees what people.
Yeah, I think she's really intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At least in a church setting. And I think but I don't think she knew she could do that before she did it. Like that, I think was really, she had to push herself to do that and just to have faith that she was right. So my guess is that even when she was like, I can fix it, she was still like a little nervous that it wasn't going to work.
I don't want to say I was surprised, but the whole autism angle of the book really had me take pause to go back and think about if you have an autistic child in the 1960s. And in our book extras, I did post about Willowbrook in Staten Island. And yeah, so can you talk a little bit to that aspect of the book?
Sure. So many of you guys may have read that this is based on the two ministers I grew up with, and one of them did have an autistic son, who I knew as a child. He was older than I was, but and his wife. So this is the couple that's very loosely inspired Charles and Lily. So the mother of the autistic son was a public school teacher, and she was on the forefront of education for all kids with disabilities, but especially for children with autism and other learning differences, very early on. And there were no educational opportunities for children with autism at that time. I mean, and really, people really were counseled to send their children away, that they would become violent. You know, the assumption was they would become violent and they would hurt siblings or hurt their parents or things like that. So there is still a school for autistic children in the church where I grew up. It's a public school. She advocated for this school being part of the public school system in New York, but it's housed in the church building where so that's a true story. I mean, James didn't build it. It was built by different people, but there was there's a school there for autistic children, and the signs are up there on the signs that I write about in the book are on the walls. And because my daughter went to nursery school on the floor below it. And so I think people, like, my characters come to me first, so that was always a part of the story for me. I feel like people sometimes think, oh, she decided to write a book that had autism in it, but I decided to write a book about these four characters, and that's the fact of one of the true facts of the book of this couple's life. So it was something that intrigued me and I wanted to explore. It was not something that I decided to write to build a book around. That wasn't but there's not that much research to be done on it. So people always ask me about my research into autism. I'm like, well, nobody knew anything. Mm-hmm. is really the research. And then I talked to friends of mine whose kids are on the spectrum and read some personal narratives of parents, more currently, more modern works, just to have a sense, to make sure I was getting it right in terms of the way that diagnosis hits.
I like how you brought, the causes into it, the birth control, and I like that. I guess you're going along with these characters and you're getting to know them. But then there were also, and I guess because I was born in 1965, you're going, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And as rich as the characters are, I enjoyed that aspect of my mind going to, oh yeah, that was going on then. The Vietnam War, that was going on then. So that was pretty cool. Does anybody I want to do kind of a last call. So, and then I have some other questions, but I want to make sure if you have anything that you want to ask or comment on, please, please, please. We're a friendly group. Take yourself off mute. This is an awesome opportunity. And Cara seems like she's a really cool person, and Kathy seems like she's a really cool person. So capitalize on it if you want to bring yourself off mute. I had another question for both of you. Before, and I want to kind of, at the end of this, I want to know what's next for both of you. But also, Cara, I read where you're in 2 book clubs.
Yeah.
Tell us about your book clubs, what you're reading, what your favorite is, and then do you have a favorite book, and do you have a favorite narrator?
Okay, yeah, so I have one book club that I've been in November. It'll be our 20th anniversary. And it was founded before I was living in San Francisco when it was founded, so I wasn't part of the founding group, but it was founded by lawyers. And so we have bylaws and all all these ways we have to go about membership and everything like that. But it's been a pretty core group. I missed their favorite book was Shot in the Heart still. And it was one of the first books they read before I joined. And their least favorite book, which they also read before I joined, was Riot, which nobody in my book club would recommend. So I have book club, and then I have my book group on the side, which book club it's like my mistress book group, and they're not happy that I step out to do that. But my book group actually it reads. So we did a lot, like 3 years ago, we did a lot of reading about race in America. And I think we read about it for about 2 years. And then sadly, we got like this new member, right before quarantine. And so when there were all the protests, she was like, let's read about race in America. And we were like, okay, but you have to find a book we haven't read. We did a lot of reading. So we read Heavy by Kiesi Lemon, which is amazing, and he reads it, and he's an amazing, that's a book I feel like would be better read because it's a memoir. Mm-hmm. And he himself, he talks a lot about the code switching that he does in his different areas of life, and his voice changes so dramatically when he's talking about one part of his life or another. So like if he's talking about being with his grandmother whose parents were slaves, he has one voice. And then when he's teaching at Amherst, he has a totally different voice. And it's like, so it's an amazing book to listen to. And our other favorite book in that group, I think the most eye-opening one for us was Brian Stevenson's book, which I'm not going to remember the name of right now. Yeah, because, right, it's terrible. But his memoir about being at the Southern Justice League and working to have more equity or
Just Mercy.
Just Mercy. I was going to say.
Somebody just put it in the chat.
Okay.
Lisa just put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
About how many Black men were being executed in the South, in our time, in our lifetime. So those are two really good books. The other book that I just read that would be great to listen to, I don't know if you've listened to this one, Kathy, but is The Great Believers by Rebecca Mackay. It's a really great one for the pandemic. It's set in the AIDS epidemic in Chicago in the 80s, but it's not necessarily about that. It's just set there. And then it jumps to the future. And it's an amazing book about society and how society reacts to this epidemic, but how everyday life just goes on. During the epidemic, after it, it's about the everyday life that goes on. And that narrator, I still have a crush on him. I don't know who he is. Yeah.
What's his name, Cara?
Michael Crouch.
Michael Crouch. I don't think I know him, but I'm trying to think of if I know that narrator, I'll introduce you.
He's so good. I mean, from the very beginning, I was like, it's, I don't know if any of you guys listened to the Harry Potter books on tape, and it's Ian Dale. After Ian Dale, this is
he's your narrator crush?
Yeah, totally.
We haven't done a male narrator in a while. Maybe we'll add that to our list. Kathy, what about you?
In terms of book clubs?
In terms of favorite books, or are you?
I'm actually currently rereading some old books. I read this year. I reread The Handmaid's Tale, and I reread I'm actually reading The World According to Garp, which John Irving is one of my favorite novelists of all time. And just, to be reading The World According to Garp, written in 1980, whatever it was, in the late 1980s, and the transgender football character, there's some stuff about that you think that was pretty wild for that time. But then in terms of audiobooks, I'm currently listening to How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, Am I saying his name right? I think. So that's been, that's what's currently on my listening. And so that's, because I am not a member of any book groups, and I did not do all of that listening and reading a couple of years ago. So I'm trying to do some catching up now. So that's what I've been working on this summer.
I don't know if we've got newer people from the Walking Book Club here. One of the last books that we did, which was selected before the riots and the Black Lives Matter, we did the book of Lost Friends by Lisa Wingate, which is based on the Lost Friends letters. And then in our book chat, we had the Whitney Plantation come on, which was, we were able to, the executive director shared a lot about slavery, and it was a great experience, not knowing that it was going to be timed with the riots, but it was good. What is next for you? So Cara, I did read where you have another project.
We do.
We're hoping that it's not another 15 years.
Me too. So is Simon & Schuster. It's going to come out with Simon & Schuster. It's a book about a painting that gets left on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And we follow the group of people in the present day, which will probably be the early 90s, who work to figure out what this painting is and to establish its provenance, which is sort of the genealogy of a piece of art, so that you know that you legally own it. And then there's a backstory, which is, well, story, an equally important part of the book is the story that happens in the past, which is about a Romani girl who's saved from going into the concentration camps by her uncle, who teaches her how to paint, and she becomes a painter in Italy in the years after World War II, actually. But the painting itself is a medieval Annunziata, so she did not paint that painting. Like it's not that neat and tidy. But yeah, that's what I'm working on.
So is it okay to ask? I don't know if this is, I'm going outside the boundaries here. And when you wrote The Dearly Beloved, I read where the characters really were formed pretty,
yeah.
You knew them.
Yeah.
Did these characters come to you like that?
The characters in the historical part, yes, and some of the characters in the present day. But I have a character who's a little bit like Lily for me, in that Lily was the most reticent to like have me tell her story. And unfortunately, the main character in the present day sections of this book is really kind of giving me trouble. But I did unearth the fact that she got electrocuted as a child in her bathroom, and now I think she's going to start telling me stuff. Wow. Yeah. So I think she's going to be an interesting person. So she's working, the guy who finds the painting is a curator who's being pushed aside by all the new young bucks, and he's pushed aside to provenance, and he wants to figure out what this painting is, and he wants to write a book on it. It'll be a bestseller. He'll retire to France, but he's too high profile to do it, so he sends his research assistant to Europe to figure out what this painting is.
Kathy, what about you? What's next up for you?
So I'm continuing to work on commercials and, doing what I do, which is basically looking for work. I mean, as an actor, like that's your job, is you look for work all the time. And then when you get the job, that's a super, super special bonus. So, I've done it. And now that with COVID, everything has shifted to home recording. So that actually has been kind of an interesting shift. And I have been, about a year ago, I bought a tiny little postage stamp house in a little town in northern Connecticut, and it needed a lot of work. And so actually I've been doing a lot of time up there in the last few months, and tearing down old plaster walls and putting in insulation and, stripping windows. And so that's been my pandemic therapy, which has been really really good. So, and hopefully, we'll see, but somewhere down the road, my goal is to put a little booth in there and just decamp up there. So that's my project.
I want to thank everybody for coming today, and a little bit of a shout out for those of you who are joining us at the early hour of 6 a.m., now 7 a.m. And to all the other of you that joined us today, thank you. And a great big virtual hug to both Kathy and Cara. It was really, truly, it's really an amazing opportunity in this weird world that we're in right now to be able to connect like this and to get to know the behind the scenes of how the book is made. And Cara, how your characters, I mean, I was fascinated to hear, you talk about your creative process. So I want to thank you both so sincerely for coming on and spending some time with us. And I hope that you'll come back.
Well, me too.
Yeah, that you'll come back for your next book, and maybe maybe Kathy's free and she can do your next book, and we can.
Hey, I'm in. Sign me up.
So, with that, I will say our next a little housekeeping. If you're with us, our next one that's on the calendar is with Lisa Wingate. It's in the fall. It's one of our Heart and Soul book chats, and the beneficiary of that's going to be Feeding America. The night swim, we should have more information on tomorrow, and keep your eye out for the next round book. And with that, I want to say thank you. Oh, a little tidbit.